Hi, it's Victoria, and I want to share with you a little story that I think can help your rising 8th, ninth grader, even your high school student, even your college student, maybe even you. Think about how to become a more engaged reader, how to get more out of the books that we read. And this story and the lesson I want to give you, this little mini lesson, is really all about what we do before we ever open a book. About 4 years ago, my cousin Bree was studying in Bologna, Italy, and her term was going to be ending, and we hatched this plan that at the end of her term I would come over and I would visit her, and we would travel around Italy, maybe a little bit around Europe, and I would see and experience places that I had always wanted to see. And this was a really great plan, and I got to work on making it happen. The work that I was doing actually didn't have anything to do with the trip because as a parent of 3 sons, as a part-time professor, and as a writing coach, I needed to organize my life just so I could be gone for 10 days. And so that's really what I worked on. And I bought my plane ticket, and I communicated with Bree about when I was arriving and how to get a taxi and all that good stuff. And so I arrived in Italy and super excited to look around Bologna, look around Rome and Florence, the other cities we were planning to visit. But one thing that Bree and I hadn't communicated is that Bree wasn't quite done with her semester in graduate school. She was still writing papers. And so when I got there, I could hang around her apartment, or I could get out and I could explore Bologna. And I'm pretty adventurous. So I thought, you know what, I'm just gonna get out. I'm gonna go see the city. And I did do a little bit of that. But I have to tell you, when I got there in Italy, this place I'd always wanted to visit, and I realized that I didn't know anything about Bologna, and I hadn't really looked into not just how to buy a museum ticket in Rome, but I didn't really know where I wanted to visit other than the sites that anyone could know. Also, I knew that I didn't speak Italian, but I actually hadn't tried to learn any Italian. In fact, I came to Italy thinking that Bree would show me around, she would be my tour guide, she would speak Italian, and I would have a great trip because Bree would be there showing me all along the way. So when we think about starting a new book, it's a little bit like taking a trip. And just like my experience in Italy and Bologna, I didn't really take the steps to ensure that it was going to be a good trip. In fact, I was really dependent on somebody else to make it a good experience for me. And sometimes that's what happens with assigned reading. We're given a new book and we just crack it open and we start reading. And then we expect that the book itself, or maybe our teacher, is going to help us be engaged. And so when the book is slower than we want, when our teacher is not as helpful as we think he or she should be, then we begin to slow down and we really begin to lose interest. And so I want to talk to you about little things that you can do to engage with reading before you ever open a book, that you can begin to open your mind, to grow your intellect before you actually start reading. And these steps are actually really simple. The very first one has to do with looking at the title of books that you read and really thinking through, what does this title mean? This is the book that I'm going to be using with my students in my Forever's Readers Workshop, and you may have read this book before. It's called The Book Thief. So this title is relatively simple. It's pretty straightforward. But I want students to think about just the fact that it's titled that. Why would anyone take books? What are situations where someone would steal books? Are books usually what people steal? So what theories do we have about a book called The Book Thief? Now, this is an interesting book cover. I've seen others of The Book Thief, and this one's okay. I think it's based on a movie. But there are some other book covers that have some really interesting images, and one of them is actually of a skeleton dancing with a little girl. And that's another exercise that you can do. You can look at a book cover and you can say, I wonder what this book is going to be about based on what I can learn just from the cover. What can I see? What can I observe? These are all ways of kind of priming our mind. But the last one, and a really important one that you can do for books that you read, and something I wish I'd done when I planned my trip to Italy, is to actually read the back of the book and to realize in the description of the book what you know and what you don't know. You're probably in the habit of reading the back of the book to decide, do I want to buy this book? If it's assigned reading, will I like this book? But this is actually something that you can do in a different way. Instead of deciding, do I want to read it or do I want to buy it? You can read the description of the book and ask yourself, how much of what they're talking about do I already know? So if you read the description of The Book Thief, you're going to learn that it takes place in 1939. So questions that I have for my students and forever readers is, what was happening in 1939? There's also mention of bombings. There's mentions of, this is a quote, a hidden Jew in the main character's basement. So for students, especially rising students going into 8th and 9th grade, questions around, what do I know about Jewish history? What does it mean to be Jewish? And what was important about being Jewish in 1939? Now, if you're an adult listening to this, you probably know all of those answers, but you have to remember that our students who are 12, 13, 14 years old may not have studied world history yet. They may not have studied the world wars. And if they have, they may have only had a real superficial learning, superficial lessons around it because maybe they were learning other things in their classes. So students, if you're watching this, sometimes parents and teachers, we just have these expectations that you know things that maybe you don't know, or maybe you've only heard of more than once. And so it's interesting to me how often, and we all do it, we skip past things that we don't know and we hop in and we expect that we're gonna really learn something along the way. But I can tell you that if you're going to read The Book Thief, an understanding of what was happening in 1939 would be really important. An understanding of what it meant to, or what it means to be a foster child, which is the context of our main character, Liesel, is very important. An understanding of what it meant to be Jewish in this time period and why there were bomb raids, those would all be really important. So what I ask students to do is read that back cover, pay attention to what you know and what you don't know, and what you don't know, look up, have some conversations, have some knowledge before you ever open that book so that it can help you. So you have titles, you have book covers, and you have the back of a book, and all of these tools can help you engage your mind before you actually begin the journey of reading.